And I spent so much time trying to protect my ego, protect that selfishness. It started as just a pebble in my shoe, and it just became a sore until eventually my foot needed to get amputated because I just carried it around and I needed to let it go. And when I did finally let it go, it was life-changing.
Playing college football.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a stud quarterback coming into college football. And you had mentioned, you told me this before, you're coming up and you think you're going to get an opportunity to play quarterback. And like, you've got a legitimate shot to get to the NFL. Like, can you tell me about that? Like, what happened there and just the story behind it and any lessons you learned from that experience?
For sure. Yeah. So long story short, my coach died, kind of changed the entire trajectory of my career. Once he died, new staff, new coaches came in, and it just had an impact on me. And it was very, very difficult for me for a couple of reasons. One, I wasn't mature enough to handle it. And two, neither were the coaches. They weren't, I think, they didn't have the emotional intelligence at the time to really like navigate the difficulty that I was having through that moment. And they didn't give me probably some of the attention that I needed or deserved, but I frankly didn't do myself any favors. But I think a lot of times when people are skilled and they have a gift, and I had a gift as a football player, when you hit adversity with that gift, it's one of the hardest things in the world to deal with, because the majority of your life, it's like the transition is pretty seamless. Like all you achieve is success, right? From the time I was a little boy to the time I got to college, like every athletic endeavor I ever participated in was really easy for me, right? And so what happens when you get to college and you're not used to that, and you're not wired to deal with it? So that was certainly really, really difficult, and a lot of ways. And I think that what I learned from that, the biggest takeaway that I had from that is I got to a point where I lost the love that I had for football. And once again, it was related to circumstance. It wasn't that I actually loved football, that I didn't love football, is that I was letting circumstance to dictate, right, the emotional component, like how I felt about it. And I went to practice every day, and I absolutely hated being there. I hated it. It was difficult for me to wake up. I didn't want to go to class. I wasn't nearly operating as the best version of myself. I was drinking too much. I had, terrible relationships with women, and all of it was reflective that I was letting this one aspect of my life dictate all of the others, all of them. And so I look back on that and who I was in those moments, and I have regret and pride at the same time. I regret how I handled it. But then I have amazing pride because I never quit. I never walked away. Like I stared that right in the face. And I just kept taking steps forward every single day, even though it was one of the most difficult periods of my life. And so my biggest takeaway, like the biggest, like I think lesson learned, in that moment was that sometimes you just like the best next thing is just moving forward. And if you could just keep moving forward, like eventually you're going to finish the race. You don't have to sprint. You just have to take the next step. And then you just have to keep focusing on the next step, not the finish line.
So to get a better understanding, you started hating football, and this was a very challenging point. Was this after your coach had died and you were supposed to become the starting quarterback?
Correct.
And then
and then I wasn't playing quarterback at all. They moved my position, and I was, kind of a role player at that point. And it was tough. It was tough on my ego. It was tough on me emotionally. I didn't have the, like I said, maturity to handle it. It was tough, being around campus and all the people who were hyping me up. And once again, going back to that, like that validation from the exterior, like I was so reliant on like other people telling me how good I was, right? Like, you're the best, you're going to be so good, you're going to play in the NFL. And like, I felt good. Like I allowed that to fill my cup, but I was never filling my own cup. And so the second people stopped pouring into me, my cup was empty. Right. So then like the only things that I let fill it were whatever was coming into me at the time. I wasn't intentional about it. So maybe it was parties, maybe it was girls, like whatever it was, like maybe it was poker. I was playing poker. Like all that stuff was just filling my cup with like low vibrational energy because it was just like the lowest hanging fruit at the time.
Mm.
And so I needed to figure that out. I needed to figure out who I was, and I needed to figure out how to like stop allowing other people to impact how I felt about myself. And so that was certainly a catalyst for that.
Do you feel like that's paid a lot of dividends for you now, or like that going through that experience, looking back at it?
Yeah, for sure. Without question, I think, don't get me wrong, it's like hard for me sometimes to like turn on the TV and like watch these guys that are out there ripping the ball and be like, oh yeah, I wish I was out there, right? But it goes back to like, then I'm not really being present because I'm living in a sense of regret. And I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have my children that I have today. I wouldn't have all the amazing blessings that I have. And the world had a different plan for me. And at that time, I wasn't creating the life that I wanted, right? Like to me, the spoon was very real. Like the coaches were in control. I was like that. Yeah, they had control over my life. Like I wasn't dictating and I wasn't creating anything. I was reacting to everything in my life at that time. And so I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't have the same kind of, I think, peace that I have right now. I wouldn't have the same kind of calm. I wouldn't have the same kind of selflessness and be willing to help people and have an impact on people. None of that would be the same. Because even I look back to who I was then, I was selfish. And I would have just have continued to be selfish because it would have fed into everything that selfish people do.
Mm. And so that was there a turning point, like a moment where that shifted, like where you learned that lesson?
And at the time, like in real time, no. I viewed it as a struggle. And it was something that I had to overcome. And then as I got older and started to mature, I looked at it with a different lens. And I think when my mom got sick, I just started to see the world like way differently and like realize like, hold on, man, this is all this stuff that I'm putting all this energy into. I feel like it could be redistributed and repurposed and done in a much more productive way. And I spent so much time trying to protect my ego, protect that selfishness, and like justify that I didn't play quarterback. And it started as just a pebble in my shoe, and it just became a sore until eventually my foot needed to get amputated, because I just carried it around, and I needed to let it go. And when I did finally let it go, it was life changing. And don't get me wrong, I still throw football just as good as anybody out there. But that was me needing to hear people calling my name and telling me how good I am. And that was about me. And there are other things that I can do now in my life to make it about other people and use my gifts to help benefit other people. Throwing a football really didn't benefit a lot of other people other than myself.